Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depend where you are. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We are delighted to host this talk today by Bia Lopes, who will be talking about education based on the book Thought and Life by Francisco Cândido Xavier through the Spirit Emmanuel. Let us all give Bia Lopes a very warm welcome. Hi, Bia.
Hi, how
How
are
are
you?
you?
So happy to be here today.
Thanks for joining us. Before she starts, allow me to introduce her. Beatriz Lopes is currently the Family Youth and Children Spiritist Education Director for the United States Spiritist Federation. She is also a representative of the US within the International Spiritist Council Youth Committee. Being a Spiritist since childhood, Bia had the remarkable opportunity to represent Spiritism globally at the United Nations at the age of 16. Since then, Bia has actively taken on various roles within the Spiritist community, from leading study groups to delivering lectures and organizing events like the annual Spiritist Youth Retreat. Please take this opportunity to send your questions during her presentation using the chat window. She has reserved time to address your comments and questions once she concludes her presentation. Bia, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here with you all today and sharing this topic, which might seem pretty standard education, right? We've all talked about education in some way or another. But the way that the message is brought in this book, Thought and Life, brings such unique insights and perspectives. And I think it'll surprise you all as well as it did as I was looking through this. So I really loved learning about this topic, going through it, and I'm excited to share it with you all today. So before we get into the message itself, let's get a bit of background on where this message starts. So let's take a moment to talk about the Apostle Matthew. So Matthew, he was a tax collector. And the Gospel according to Spiritism brings us a little context of what this means. These were lower class tax collectors who were mainly in charge of collecting duties at the city gates. So, what's important to note in the context of being a tax collector is that at that time, tax collectors were seen as greedy and as doing the wrong thing because they would charge people more and then keep the rest for themselves. And there were the higher level tax collectors, the publicans, that they were really seen as doing this mischief and tricking people and being greedy. So there's even the common phrase today, greedy as a publican or rich as a publican, because of this. So when we're talking about Matthew being a tax collector, it's a very significant point to show that it was a role that not that many people liked because tax collectors tended to be greedy and corrupt. But then one day, Matthew encounters Jesus and he starts to follow Jesus. A lot of the disciples who follow Jesus, they have these big, maybe elaborate stories on how they got to meet Jesus. But for Matthew, it was actually quite simple, the account that we have. In the Gospel according to Matthew, it says, "As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. 'Follow me,' he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him." So it's really almost inspiring the simplicity of this message, right? It's that Jesus was passing by, saw Matthew and said, "Follow me." And he did just that. So it's interesting to see that this account is actually from the Gospel of Matthew. What that means is Matthew became an evangelist. So he's the author of one of the four Gospels, the Gospel of Matthew. So this really makes sense because as a tax collector, he was used to record keeping and taking these notes. So he did the same thing for Jesus and Jesus's teachings. He took good records of what Jesus was doing and sharing around the area, the region. Now let's dive a little bit into some pieces of the Gospel of Matthew. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 23 to 25, Matthew talks about how Jesus, at this point is when he starts to follow Jesus. So he's following Jesus, and he notices that as he's traveling with Jesus, as Jesus is traveling to further regions, Jesus is gaining this crowd of followers. So not only the disciples are going with Jesus, but also these crowds who were interested in, curing a sick. Maybe they were interested in learning more, in seeing what Jesus was doing. So all of a sudden, as they're traveling from region to region together, there's this crowd of people that start following along with them in their travels. And that leads us to chapter 5 of the Gospel of Matthew, which is the famous Sermon on the Mount. And so what the Sermon on the Mount was Jesus seeing all of these people that are now following him to see what he's doing and to learn from him. He paused this journey. He took a pause from, continuing to move from region to region to go on, on a mountain or a hill, as we can imagine here. He went up top and called the disciples and all of those that were gathered to listen to some really important messages that he had to share. So in this Sermon on the Mount, he shared so many inspiring messages, some of the best known being the Beatitudes, which the Beatitudes are the messages such as, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." So we know those are common verses that usually people are aware of, that we know, and it happened here at this Sermon of the Mount. But what also happened at the Sermon of the Mount was the message of the salt and the light. So Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." And so if we dig into this a little bit more, what does that mean? Why would Jesus say you are the salt of the earth? Well, salt, all throughout our history, has been really important. Salt, before we had refrigerators, salt was the primary form to store and preserve meats. Salt in Roman Empire was so important that it was even used as a form of currency. Like, you could trade things for salt, and that was a valuable currency. We've also seen that over time it's been used therapeutically in medicine, and of course we use it every day. So salt has so many usefulnesses to us that when Jesus is saying here, "You are the salt of the earth," he's saying that you are useful. There's so much you can do. There's so much potential that we can be used for, so much good that we can do. But then the message, Jesus continues and says, "But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." So, of course, we know that salt itself isn't going to lose its saltiness, but what if it did? If salt didn't have those salty properties, then it wouldn't be useful. It wouldn't, preserve our meat or taste our food or have the same therapeutic benefits. So what Jesus is saying here is that you are the salt. We have this potential. We have all these things that we can do to benefit other people, the world, and ourselves. But if we choose to not do it, then we won't have that usefulness, right? It's just going to, like they're saying, it's going to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. So if you think of salt, it's just a rock, right? It's a rock. So if salt wasn't salty, it would just be another rock that we see on the road or we see when we're hiking, and we would ignore it. And that's what it would become. So Jesus is saying, you are the salt. You have this potential. You can do all of these great things. But if you don't, it will go to waste, right? And it'll just be pushed to the side and the world will continue on. So, salt is meant to be salty the same way that we have purpose and we're meant to be purposeful in what we do. And that salt really, right, becomes worthless if it loses that quality. So then so first Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. And then he says, you are the light of the world. So just like we were thinking about the salt, what does that mean when we think of light, when we think of light of the world? Well, we think of the sun shining on us, right? We think of that warmth. Usually we think of happy days, of good times, and we need that light. Science has already shown us that we need light in our lives. As we're approaching this time of, as winter is coming and we're approaching this colder time where it's darker more of the year, we know that there's the very real seasonal depression that happens because of the lack of light people are receiving. So there's so many cases in our world that we've seen how important it is to have light. So Jesus said, we are the salt, right? We are the salt of the earth. We are so useful. There's so many things we can do. And we're also the light of the world. And in Matthew 5:14, it continues saying, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. So I actually brought this real example here of the city of San Marino. So San Marino is a country, one of the smallest countries in the world, that's actually completely encapsulated within central Italy. So it's completely within Italy, surrounded by Italy. And it has a few cities, but the San Marino is the country, but it's also the capital city. So San Marino, the city, is set on this mountain, Mount Titan. So the city, you can see here, this very real city, can be seen from all below. You can't hide that city, right? It's there, it's shining its light because everyone below can see that city. So just to give a little context or a visual of when Jesus is saying a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. It really can't, right? You really can't hide this city that's on this hill. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but put it on a stand and give light to all the house. So if we are the light, right? If you're on the top of that hill, you're going to be shining and you're going to be able to reach really far because everyone can see you and you can see everyone, right? Like that's spreading really far. And you can't hide that, right? You're not going to be able to hide that light if you're standing at the top of the hill. However, you're also not going to put it under a basket, right? You're not going to hide a light. If you are putting a candle or holding up a flashlight, no one walks through and puts the light low, right? You walk through holding that flashlight up, holding that lantern, the candle up so that it shines as much as possible. So if we are the light, we have to be shining. We have to spread that light. We can't just be hiding it and keeping it down, because when we keep it down, it's not as useful to us. The same thing with the salt losing its properties of saltiness. If we have the light, which Jesus said we do, he said, you are the light of the world. So if we are the light, we have to let that shine. And that's where Jesus goes in the next piece here, where it says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So let your light shine. So that's for all of us. Don't hide your light. Be useful. Go on the top of that mountain and share it, right? Hold your light up and shine it for others to help yourself and others. So we can be an example of the good and inspire others to do the same. So this is exactly how Emmanuel starts off this message about education in the book Thought and Life. So he starts exactly like this, saying, Christ said, "Let your light shine." And it is he, the divine master, who is our sublime light in the evolution of this planet. So what's so impactful by this statement is that, okay, let your light shine, but it's Jesus who is the light, who has that light, is telling us that we have it too. We can do it too. So Jesus being that sublime light, telling you you can do the same thing, you are the same thing, is so inspiring. It's like when someone tells you, oh, you should try this, but if they haven't tried it themselves, you don't necessarily believe them, right? Or you don't feel as good. But when someone who's accomplished something says you can do it too, you feel that encouragement. You feel like you can do it. So here, Jesus, who is that, like it says here, is our sublime light, telling us that we have light and we can let it shine. But the message in Thought and Life continues on to talk about how some people questioned this saying. People said, okay, let your light shine. What does that mean? So Emmanuel says, people used to believe that the Lord's advice was only a mystical call, urging superficial worshippers within orthodoxy to believe in a supposed individual prominence, to be acquired after death upon entering an imaginary celestial court. So what Emmanuel is pointing out is that people at that time thought that let your light shine meant after you died. After this life, after you died, then you should let your light shine so that you can go to a good place. So people weren't really worried about that now. They were saying, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Once I die from this incarnation, I'll let my light shine. I'll try and shine a light so that I can go to a good place. But why did people have this idea? So let's dig into that a little bit. In the book, Heaven and Hell, in part 1, chapter 3, it talks about how the ancients believed in this existence of superimposed skies. So these skies, that Earth was at the center, and then around there was these different levels of the skies. And they attributed these different levels to different heavens, as you can kind of imagine here. And what's interesting about this thought is that, yeah, of course, this came from a limited astronomical knowledge, is that they didn't have much knowledge. So they had this idea that there's different levels of the sky, and that might correlate to our, heavens, to places we can go after death. But what's really interesting about this belief is that it can really be seen in all theogonies of the time, or systems of gods at that time. So in all of these different places, they had a similar idea of these different layers that you could go to. Most commonly, you would see these layers up to 7. Up to 7 was the most common layers of these superimposed skies. But Ptolemy actually identified 11 in his study. You could see them here, 11, with the last one being the Empyrean, the heaven. So he created 11 layers of these different skies, and the last one being heaven. So when people are thinking of shine your light, they're thinking about, I need to shine my light to get to that top level. That's where we are trying to be. And this was really credible at the time because, again, they were learning about the earth, learning about astronomy. And Ptolemy was a very well-known Egyptian astronomer, mathematician, and geographer. And he created the Earth-centric model of our solar system. So the idea that Earth was at the center and the planets and everything was going around us. And of course, while today we know that that is incorrect, that is still a huge step in the right direction that we needed to continue advancing and growing. So at that time, that was a great discovery and a great, push in the right direction to have that Earth-centric model of the universe. And you can see here that Earth-centric model correlated as well to this last layer, which is heaven. So you can see where people were thinking, okay, let your light shine is once I pass away, once from this incarnation, I want to get to the top. So I need to let my light shine there. However, and this continues by Emmanuel in The Thought and Life, today we recognize that his lessons should be applied in all situations of everyday life. So it's understandable that people at the time, they might have ignored that message. They said, okay, yes, I'll let it shine, but eventually, later on. But we see here, Emmanuel's pointing out, right? We can do this in all situations in our everyday life. We can let our light shine right now. We don't have to wait for after. We don't have to wait a year, 2 years. We don't have to wait to let our light shine. We can do that right now in the situations we're in every day. And so now Emmanuel continues, and he goes a little into some science about light. He says, nowadays, earthly science recognizes the presence of light in all places. So I brought an example here that, it's taught in very early on in education that there's different types of light and it's present in all places. Of course, there is the visible spectrum, which is what we're able to see. But then, as you can see here, there's a lot of other light of electromagnetic that we can't see, but it is there. It is happening. So we see here that the visible spectrum is such a small piece of all of these different types of light. Even the sun, you can see here, is not in our visible spectrum because we can't look at the sun directly, right? So when we're talking about the light we can see, that's a little bit. But if we think of light as this bigger group, as of all of these different wavelengths, it changes, right, our perspective. And we can see that, yeah, light really is everywhere. And we see that the radio waves all the way to the left, those are much bigger and more, longer to do one wave, while the radioactive elements, those are much quicker, much shorter waves. So it's a very specific little part, a length and a size that our eyes can see, but there's so much more there. And if our eyes somehow were programmed to a different wavelength, we would see different waves and different forms of light and not this visible spectrum that we currently see. And this study, Emmanuel saying here that light science recognizes how important light is. There's even optics, which is a branch of physics that studies the behaviors and properties of light. So earthly science really is digging into this, seeing that light is everywhere, even if it's not visible to the naked eye, and really studying this topic. So as Emmanuel said, really important, and earthly science is recognizing that and is showing us that. And then Emmanuel continues and says, a deeper study of the human body has revealed that it is more a vehicle of energy than it is a state of matter. A compound of infinitesimal particles reciprocally attracting and repelling each other, causing microscopic explosions of light. So that is, Emmanuel really went scientific with us for a moment. So let's dig into that a little bit. What Emmanuel is saying is that a deeper study of our human body shows us that there's actually a lot of energy happening instead of just matter, right? We think that it's just a matter like we think of a rock, right? Just a sandbag, just all this matter right there. But no, actually, our bodies are made up a lot of this energy and of these waves. And it's a compound of infinitesimal particles. So little tiny, we know we go to molecules and atoms, but we can even break those atoms up even further. So let's take a look at a little example to get a better idea of this. So here we have one atom. In the atom, we have the electrons, that the electrons are going around the center. In the center, that's called the nucleon, we have the neutrons and the protons, which are also moving. What's interesting here is that we see that there is a lot of empty space, right? There's a lot of empty space around the electrons because they're moving, but where they're not, there's a lot of empty space. But what science is showing us, and what Emmanuel is bringing here as well, is that this isn't really empty space. This has this electromagnetic field that's energy, that's holding it together. Think about it. If we didn't have energy holding these electrons together, they would just fly off in any direction. So there is this energy that's holding those electrons into place. And they call it the electron cloud. And also within the nucleus itself, that centerpiece, there's two types of energy we can see happening. First, we can see that those neutrons and protons, they're moving. We can see that they're moving. And of course, this is much slowed down to how they would actually be moving. But we can see that they're moving. So that is kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the moving energy that's actually being used. So that's moving, and as it says, causing microscopic explosions of light. So it's moving, hitting into each other, causing these little explosions of light and energy. So there's a lot of energy there with the things that are moving, the electrons moving, and those particles in the nucleon moving. And we also see the potential energy. The potential energy is that cloud of energy that's holding the nucleons in place closer to the, holding it close to the nucleon. And also there is a strong force, it's called the strong force, that holds that nucleon together. So it's because, or else, again, if those protons and neutrons are moving, then they could also just go off into any direction. So there's this force that is keeping those together. And that is potential energy, this energy that's there to hold all these things together. And it's so interesting to think of, because when we start zooming out a little bit more, now we have different atoms, and these atoms are doing a similar thing, right? They're moving all over very, very quickly, like we can't even imagine with our eyes, but they're moving so quickly. And they're also creating these microscopic explosions of light, right? So they're bouncing off each other, creating this energy, this light, attracting and repelling each other. And that creates us. And so it's so interesting to see that all this stuff that we think we're just a hard matter, there's actually a lot of this empty space, and that empty space is that energy. So we can turn here to Albert Einstein to give us a little more of an explanation on this. Albert Einstein and his famous equation, E equals mc squared. We all tend to talk about this equation, but maybe we've never really thought about what he's talking about. What he's talking about here is that energy equals the mass times a constant speed of light squared. So what he's saying here is that energy is correlated directly with mass, and mass is directly correlated with energy. So those two things go hand in hand. The only difference you see here is this speed of light, that constant. So they're interchangeable. Energy can become mass, and mass can become energy. So this is a really, digging into this formula a little bit, it's really interesting to see how it applies directly to what Emmanuel is sharing with us, that everything that we think is mass, it's actually a lot of this energy, this kinetic, microscopic, infinitesimal particles having a lot of energy that creates our mass. So, science also tells us that if we really looked into it, 98% of what makes up our body would not be just mass. It's this energy that's happening in the tiniest microscopic level that we can't even see. So going back to what Emmanuel said here, A deeper study of the human body revealed that it's more a vehicle of energy than a state of matter, a compound of infinitesimal particles reciprocally attracting and repelling each other, causing microscopic explosions of light. So now I think we get a little bit of a better understanding of what that means, right? How is our body this energy? And, if we imagine that we could zoom out and see our body as these atoms, we would see that, right, like here, these would all be moving, but there is that empty space. So what's holding it together, right? This energy. So it is energy and light. Literally, when we look into, right, how our body is working and how these tiny, tiny atoms are working. So Emmanuel continues on this thought and says, chemistry, physics, and astronomy have demonstrated that terrestrial man lives and moves amidst a realm that is crisscrossed by rays. So going back to all of those waves that we were seeing, these waves, we don't realize it, but they're everywhere around us. So if we take a look at this photo here, think about how many waves you can see. We can see that there is the lamp, right? That's a light that we can see. There's the fire that's producing a light that we can see. But there's also the light that's coming from our computers that we're on right now or our phones. There's also from the radio, there's waves, from the sun, from, they put a dentist across the street with the x-rays. So there's all these waves that are happening constantly in our lives, and they are traveling all the way to us. And they're crisscrossing, almost as we can imagine, like this image here, right? And again, they highlighted that visible spectrum down here. So we can see just a small portion, but all of these different waves, they're crisscrossing our daily lives at all times. And you can see that these are at different lengths that we just can't see, but they are there. And going back to thought and life, Emmanuel continues saying, in the intimacy of this glorious empire of energy, we have mental rays conditioning the elements in which life expresses itself. So here, Emmanuel is now connecting the same way that we have this energy has these rays. We have mental rays, and this connects to our thoughts as well as this energy that we were talking about. And he's going to dive some more into that. Emmanuel says, thought is a creative force projected by the person who generates it by means of subtle waves in circuits of action and reaction. So Emmanuel is saying here that just like we saw that light and those different waves moving, our thoughts are moving the same way. When our thoughts leave our head, they are also producing these waves. And they, like it says here, subtle waves in action and reaction, right? It's going out and waves are coming back to us. So it's really interesting how Emmanuel ties in these light and these waves to our thoughts. And getting back to Einstein, who brought us so much scientific knowledge, one thing to mention here that Emmanuel will bring up is Einstein's quantum theory of light. And so at that time of Einstein in 1905, the wave nature of light, it was common. People accepted the fact that light moves in waves. So that was a really well-known and accepted fact that there are all these wavelengths, and that's how, that's how everything is working, and then how radios are working. And they started discovering this more and more, that, okay, yes, everything is moving in these waves. But what Einstein proposed in his quantum theory of light that was found, that he discovered and studied, was that light not only is in wavelengths, but there is this bundle of energy. There's this ball we can think of energy. So it does travel in a wave, but it's traveling first as this bundle of energy that's moving along the wave. And so what's really interesting about this is that Einstein is showing us that light not only interacts as a wave, but also as a particle. So when we apply this to our thoughts, we can think of it like a thought leaving our head and traveling in these waves. Or the same thing with light. When we see light, there's a little, and of course we can't see it with our naked eye, but there's like a particle, this bundle of energy, and that moves in a wave, and that reaches and crisscrosses us. So going back to thought and life, Emmanuel here brings that concept in. Going back to what he said before, thought is a creative force projected by the person who generates it by means of subtle waves in circuits of action and reaction. This is as measurable as the photon, which receives impulses through the luminous system it produces, traveling through space at a predetermined speed, thus sustaining the glowing breath of creation. So here he's directly tying it in, because this bundle of energy that Einstein found and talked about in his quantum theory of light, he named a photon. So this photon, Emmanuel's bringing it up, our thoughts is just as measurable as that photon. So the same way that we're talking about this photon of light, that it's a bundle of energy and it moves in waves, our thoughts are doing the same thing. They're moving at a constant speed, at a predetermined speed, and it's leaving like as a bundle of energy, and it's traveling. And when we talk about the speed of light, we think that just means really fast. But if we actually take a look at the speed of light, it is 299,792,458 meters per second. So what that means is that would be getting from Earth to the moon in about 1 second. So we can barely imagine how fast that is, right? So he's saying that not that it's directly the speed of light, but our thoughts are moving at a predetermined speed as well. That is, similar to this, as measurable as this. So all of us, our thoughts, they're leaving our heads, they're traveling in this bundle of energy and making it very far in a very quick time. And this really shows us the impact that our thoughts can have and the reach that they can have so quickly. So Emmanuel continues here saying, again, we say, the human mind is a mirror of light which projects and assimilates rays. So now going back to our mind, we're this mirror of light. So Jesus told us, let your light shine. We have this light within us. So we are shining that out. We can shine that out. And also those rays are coming back to us too, right? From other people. But what's important to think about in this constant trading when we're thinking about our thoughts is this constant trading is good and bad. When we have negative thoughts, that's also leaving us and traveling so quick. And other people's negative thoughts are coming to us. So we're in this constant trading of thoughts, whether good or bad. We're all connected. Just because we don't see it, that is happening. Those interactions are happening. So it's important to remember that as much as we can send, our thoughts are going out and they're going far places, others are also directed, and we could be influenced by their thoughts. However, Emmanuel says, this mirror is more or less a prisoner of the thick shadows of ignorance. Just as before excavation, a precious stone is encrusted by the subterranean sediments. So we have this light, we have this mirror that's reflecting out the light, but for us, the mirror is more or less a prisoner. We can think about it here. It's being contained. It can't reach out because of the ignorance we have. the things that we don't know, the things that, none of us here on earth as a world of trials and atonements are perfect. And we all have these ignorances that are blocking our light from shining, blocking that mirror inside of us from reflecting outwards. Just as they said, as a precious stone still encrusted in the subterranean sediments. So there can be a diamond in the rock, but it's not going to shine. It's not going to be that diamond that we know unless it's uncovered, because right now it's fully covered by that rock. And so it's not able to shine at all. And so Emmanuel says, in order to be able to give off celestial rays and project its own brightness, it is indispensable to cast off this layer of darkness through a process at the cost of grinding work. So if we want to give out this light, we first have to remove those layers that are blocking it. And if we think about our diamond, right, we have to put a lot of work to excavate that, to grind that down, to get just the diamond, right? It's not that we can just want it to come out. We have to do a lot of work ourselves. We have to want it. We have to put in the work to clean up those, the darker rock around the diamond, or those impurities in us, those ignorances in us that are holding us back from letting our light shine. And notice that even though here in this case, we've extracted the diamond, there's still some refining and polishing and things that need to be done to get it to be that diamond that, that we see that's really shining and brilliant. So then Emmanuel says, hence the real need of education for everyone. So this is where we need education, because we have these ignorances. We know that all of us on earth have our challenges that we're going through, our trials, our imperfections, things that we need to overcome. And that's why we all need education. We need to learn to better ourselves and let that light shine, right? Remove that barrier from our light. And in the Spirit's book, question 685, in Kardec's comment, he gives us a really important note that says, education is the sum of acquired habits. So it's not just that we can want it and learn it one time and be done with it. This is an acquired habit. We have to keep working at this. We have to keep trying, keep learning, keep doing our best to start removing those layers of ignorance that we have that's holding back our light. So there's that need for education, but we really have to put in the work ourselves, just like with that diamond. We have to put in the work. We have to do this over and over until we really learn, until it really becomes a habit and we can shed those layers of ignorance. And so Emmanuel comes back and says, let us also remember the words we referred to before of the eternal benefactor in his verbal lesson, which he said in an imperative form, let your light shine. Meaning that the potential of our light in our spirit should shine to its fullest. So again, Jesus isn't saying, wait for the right time, wait a little bit. He's saying, let your light shine. He's saying, you have the light. He's not asking a question. He's not saying, maybe if you have light, let it shine. Maybe one day let your light shine. He's saying, let your light shine. Right now, the light that you do have, that we all have within us, let that spread out. Let that shine. And to its fullness, to the potential that it has. Of course, it's going to take hard work. It's going to take this dedication to be able to remove that ignorance and persevere through those. But we can do it. We will do it. Emmanuel says, such a state can only be reached through the kind of education that will offer the required improvement. So we can reach the state of shining our light through education. But what kind of education? And Emmanuel is going to share this with us here. But education that refines the intellect and improves mankind's inner world in knowledge and goodness, wisdom and virtue, is not merely achieved by instruction from the outside. So it can't just be from the outside. We can't make a change just from other people telling us what to do or giving us knowledge and wisdom and trying to be good. We have to do it ourselves. We have to take that steps ourselves, right? It's great. It's important that we have outside education, that we are learning, that we're actively seeking places for other people to teach us things. But it's up to us if we're going to apply it. No one can force us to make a change in our lives the same way we can't force other people to make a change in their lives. So it's not just that instruction from the outside. And then here, Emmanuel ends his message saying, rather, it must have the conscious consent of the will. When the will dedicates itself freely and spontaneously to goodness, without any constraint, it can liberate and refine the heart, imprinting on it a crystal clear image of the soul. The soul is then able to reflect the glorious life, subsequently transforming the mind into a precious powerhouse of superior energy, projecting reflexes of beauty and sublimation. So he ends it on such a powerful note, saying that it's that conscious consent of the will. We can get instructions from other people. We can have these other lights and these thoughts coming to us, but we have to will it. We have the will, right? We can power ourselves to accept these teachings, to take them into our lives, to keep practicing them, to turn them into a habit and improve ourselves. But we have to do it. We have to have that will, that drive to try and improve ourselves, to try and learn and do good. And when we are able to do that, it says here, right, that will liberate and refine the heart. And that's the moment that we are going to shine. And so I think a great example of letting our light shine shows in the book Volte, which means returned, by Chico Xavier, by the spirit Brother Jacob. And in this book, Brother Jacob talks to us about how before he had disincarnated in his last incarnation, he was a pretty good person. He was very involved in Spiritism. He tried to do good things. He helped other people. And him and the others around him, they thought that, yeah, he's a pretty good person. When Brother Jacob, when he disincarnates and he goes to the spiritual world, he does indeed go to a good spiritual realm. But what he's realized and he's shocked about is as he's looking around, he realizes, wow, everyone has this light shining from them and I don't. Where's my light? So he's shocked by that. You know, he understands like, okay, he did make it to a decent spiritual realm, but where's my light? Like I'm, you know, maybe not that good. I didn't have that light shining. So he spends that time to educate himself. He up there in the spirit, in the spirit realm, he takes the time to educate. And the book even says almost over 200 days of studying and trying to improve himself and really dedicating himself to learning about this improvement and everything, right, that he might not have known in this one incarnation that he just had, and how can he move forward. So he spent a lot of time in this educational process. And one day he went sorry about that. One day he went he was walking back to his spiritual home in this spiritual community, and he was attacked by this group of spirits that were from the Catholic Church, and they were bullying him because he didn't have the light. They were bullying him and making fun of him and insulting him and being mean because, oh wow, you don't have a light. And in that moment, he realized that in his last incarnation, he was pretty, he treated people from the Catholic Church as they were insignificant, and he didn't give them much credit. And he was like, oh, why are they doing that? So he wasn't very kind to them in his thoughts in his last incarnation. And now seeing these spirits attacking him, he felt bad about what he had done. He wanted to apologize, to understand where they were coming from. And so he took a moment to meditate. And right there and then he started meditating and he started praying. And not just saying the words, but really, truly feeling those words, really understanding where they were coming from, asking for their help, and also apologizing for the way that he had previously thought and previously treated. And his prayer was so real, so from the heart, that it even made him emotional. He even cried. And when he finally then opened his eyes, he saw that they were backing away without really saying anything. They were backing away. And he noticed, oh, there's a presence of a light near me. Let me see, turning to which elevated spirit came to help him because of his prayer. And when he turned to the elevated spirit, the spirit says, Jacob, do not be amazed by the light that surrounds you. It belongs to you. So finally, in that moment, Brother Jacob found his light. His light shined because he took that time to educate himself, to learn, to remove those ignorances that he had, to a moment that his light could finally shine. And he proved it in practice. And then the enlightened spirit said to him, your light will grow with the expansion of your devotion to the infinite good. Your light will keep growing. He got a little bit of his light shining, but it will keep growing as he devotes himself to the good. Not only saying things, not only study things, but putting them into practice, and your light will shine and continue to grow. I think this is such an inspiring message for all of us to take a moment to think of how can we let our light shine right now? What are the things we can do little by little to study, to work hard, and also put it into practice so that we also let our light shine. So to leave you off today with a little bit of some ideas on how we can let our light shine or start working towards this, I brought the message 31 from the book Christian Agenda by the Spirit Andre Luis through the medium Chico Xavier. In your daily struggles, do not demand politeness from your companion. Demonstrate yours. Referring to good deeds, do not await for collaboration. Before all else, be the first to collaborate. In trivial tasks, do not demand the effort of others. Show your own goodwill. In jobs that require understanding, do not ask your neighbor to rise to your level. Learn to descend to his and help him. In the ordinary dealings of life, do not wait for others to reveal their excellent qualities. Express the elevated gifts that you already possess. In every earthly creature, there exists light and shadows. Allow your nobility to become conspicuous in order that the nobility of others may come to your encounter. Thank you all so much for being here today and diving into this profound message with me. And I'm so inspired, and I hope you all are too, to work on letting our light shine, the light that we all have, the light that we all are. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Bia. Thank you for so much food for thought for all of us to reflect and analyze. We ask for everyone to stay with us for the Q&A session that will start shortly after some announcements. So the United States Spiritist Federation has the virtual course called Introduction to Mediumship. It's a free virtual course for beginners. We invite individuals eager to explore the realm of spirit communication according to Spiritism. Check out the new course at learn.spiritist.us, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. Next, the United States Spiritist Federation has a podcast-like series called Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life. It's based on the works by Joanna De Angelis, and a new episode comes every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It is available on YouTube and Spotify. Also, there is a new app called a Spiritist app called Be My Hope, which is available on the App Store and Google Play. It offers uplifting content in a collection of videos, daily messages, and audio materials. You can download it now. Also, you see a QR code on the screen. If you want to help the United States Spiritist Federation to produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, please scan the QR code for your donation. Now, let's start addressing the questions and comments that you have. There's still time for you to send yours. Okay, Bia, from the United States Spiritist Federation. In your view, at what stage of evolution will science be obliged to recognize the existence of God?
That's a great question, a deep question. I think what's so interesting about when we see science and Spiritism going hand to hand is just exactly that, of how it does go hand in hand, and things that, Spiritism that Emmanuel was already bringing us is also directly being shown in science and learning. But as we see, the spirit world is a bit ahead of us, and we're catching up. We're learning some of those things. So I think that we will get there. We get to the point that earthly science also recognizes the existence of God. But for right now, we're working on the steps that we need to get to that level of understanding.
Thanks. Okay, next, from the TVC, communication via thought is how more elevated spirits communicate. What do you think we still need to get to that level?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? We talk about this this transaction of thoughts, this concentrating of thoughts that we have, even here incarnated in these material bodies. And we can see that with, sometimes we're thinking something and someone thinks the same thing, or sometimes we're pushing negative energy onto someone and they can start to feel that, not directly, but they realize that something is going on, right? There's a negative energy. So when we talk about in the spirit world, we imagine when we're not held back by this very material body, it's easy, right? That's how we can communicate our thoughts. It's very clear that our thoughts will travel, and that's how we'll be able to communicate. So I think we can already do that once we are incarnated. And right now, disincarnated. Because right now, incarnated, our human physical body is holding back that transaction of thought. But in the spirit world, it doesn't have that barrier.
Thanks, Bia. Okay, from the United States Spiritist Federation, what is the best way to control our negative thoughts?
That's a great question. It's tough. I think for me, at least, it's the redirection, right? When we have a negative thought, let's try and stop it. Of course, those negative thoughts are going to come, but let's stop it before we spiral on, and we keep pressing on that topic, on those thoughts, right? If we stop it, one thing for me is doing a quick prayer And sometimes you're not in the mindset that you can do, you know, a long prayer, but saying, Jesus, I need your help here, and just taking a moment to pause can really help you. To pause that negative thought, reconsider, and then approach it all differently. And usually, when you come back, you don't. You're like, oh yeah, that was a little too much, and you don't feel the same way.
Thanks. Yeah, it's an exercise, right? Daily exercise. Okay, I think this is the last that we have from the United States Spiritist Federation. Allan Kardec was first and foremost an educator. What that tells us about the codification of Spiritism?
That's a great question. So exactly, I think it shows us the importance of education, right? And Allan Kardec being an educator and seeing all the questions that he was asking and everything he was learning is so important. And I think it shows us too that you're not just because you are an educator, right? You're also learning. We're all learning. So there might be something that we know a lot about and that we can share, but there's also an opportunity from us to learn from other people. So I think it's really interesting, and especially how, you know, bringing together all the questions that Allan Kardec asked, the research he was able to provide, bringing in this educator viewpoint, it was really cool.
Okay. Thanks, Bia. Thanks for everyone that watched today's talk, and those who have been following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. Next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't miss our next talk with Bernadette Leal, talking about creating conscious joy. Bia, before we close this presentation, can you please say a prayer, closing prayer?
Of course. Jesus, mentor spirits, thank you for being with us in this moment, allowing us to educate ourselves, to learn, to be inspired that our light can shine.
Okay, we lost Bia in the middle of the prayer. So let's thank our spiritual benefactors for this wonderful opportunity of being together, of receiving so much enlightenment, so much education. We ask for the protection throughout the week, that we may continue to have our path guided and illuminated by the teachings of our Master Jesus. With our hearts full of gratitude, we ask permission to close our meeting. So be it.